three parts. Basically, my interest in the topic. And I know this week I had about 2 conversations with students. And often they're like, tell me more about this interest. Tell me more about this topic. So I thought I will group it in a way first to show why this interest. And then second, I will look at where it began in terms of the recent initiatives to put what is called the Crown Act into effect. And so we'll begin with the New York Hair Guidance, as well as what I call my NYU project. And then we'll come down to where we are now in terms of how I'm advancing this research. So please come along with me. And also later along the line, we're going to have, after the first part of the presentation, we're going to have a panel presentation. And then we'll have questions and answers. We're hoping we have a special guest who sent in a message we're hoping to voice. And she is a state representative in Kentucky. And she's sponsoring one of the Crown Acts, basically the act to ban every discrimination based on a person's natural hair. So hopefully we'll get to, she will join us as well in the conversation. So let me begin with her message briefly. We'll have to be switching slides just because we'll be playing some of the sounds from online. So hopefully, I trust that technology will favor us. As we will probably be going on as we try to figure out how to get the message across from the state representative who generously sent us this recording and has also agreed to join us. But yes, I thought it would be a good beginning because she is one of the people who are at the forefront, who are trying to take the initiative in terms of passing the act. Nadia, if you could please.
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, all right. We'll come to that. So where it all began, let's just see where it began. I thought it would be interesting. This is my graduation from the University of Ghana in 2011, 2012. And I showed this picture to a friend here in the US. And interestingly, this friend made an interesting observation. And it sort of created my curiosity. And again, we are all sometimes blinded by what the familiarity. We are so used to it, we don't even observe it until someone points it out. And the question was, why are all these ones having their hair low cut, especially the little ones? These ones. Well, no, this is not so little. This is my brother. So my big brother. And it's interesting because in Ghana, I went through basic school all the way through university with my hair cut just like them. If I had taken my cap, you would have seen that my hair was low cut. And it's because we have been trained. We've gone through school to realize that you cannot grow your hair beyond certain level. After a certain, we've seen schools where teachers will bring you forward and put a scissors into your hair, cut it halfway, and they leave it. It's not like they're even making an effort to do what the barbers do. They want to shame you so that you go home and correct it. So we've grown with this kind of attitude, with this kind of training, upbringing, where you are told that your hair must be low cut if you are a student in school. Not to talk of the workplace and other institutions. I have grown up in quite a small community, though in the Greater Accra region, which is the regional capital. I grew up in a suburb where everyone knew each other, and you couldn't go out with the Locs. I'm someone who I admire people, I would say, who wear their hair natural, like Afro, like Locs. And I had dreamed that one day I would do it. In fact, last year, when I was here, I was going to go to a presentation, and my hair had grown a little during the summer, so I was always covering it. And then when I removed it at home and I did a video call with a friend, her comment was, "You do not want to go with this haircut to this conference." And I was like, "How is that?" It's like, you don't want to create a wrong impression, and that was it. So again, that hair polish policing, came back from home and sort of has followed us or followed me over this period. So yes, part is the limited or total absence of education on race. Back home, especially growing back home, we really had little. We've had some kind of training about more of the timelines of Ghana's historical colonial timelines, how the Danes, how the Spanish, the Swedes, the Swedish, how they got to the West African coastline, how later they transferred power to the British from the 18th. And the British had basically dominated or ruled Ghana for about 136 years. And I'm just putting it again in context. Ghana gained independence now about 60 years. So we are even less than halfway into from the colonial period to the time of independence. But yet, education on it is often limited. It's more of telling you about the history, especially in Ghana. Beyond Ghana, you hardly learn more when it comes to issue of race and the issue of that consciousness around racism. Along the line, as I started working in media, first time I applied for a visa, not UN visa, to go to Denmark for a fellowship. And I came to this thing where you are asked, what's your racial group? What's your ethnic group? And I'm like, okay. And then later as I traveled, especially toward Europe, one of the clearest example I have is this day where we traveled early dawn. We traveled all night from Senegal, and we got to Spain, Madrid. And on arrival, all the white folks were allowed to go this way. All the black folks who were coming, and this is like, what, as recently, less than 10 years ago, we were all taken into a room. Your luggage will be searched. Your passport and document will be looked at, as if dumbly to say that those who issued these passports back home, their own embassies and officials, who will have to make, you will have to make a lot of justification to get this document, as if they were dumb enough that they will give you anything. And yet when you arrive, you are still strained, you are still, obviously it's racial profiling, but they wouldn't say it that way. So all this kind of build into me curiousness in terms of aspects or issues around racism. And then as I go later along the line, I'll show an example of still some of our countries are still having to deal with issues of like the hair, as I was telling you, the legacy of racism on the continent, not just in Ghana. So that brings us to why we are here today, the New York, the Crown Act, and a bit of a background. I was in school in NYU thinking about my project to the rest when New York State came out with what they call hair guidance. And it was interesting when I heard it first. And truly, I may have that consciousness about my reservations around my hair, but I didn't know that it was still so much steeped in the system here, steeped in racism, centuries of it. And so when the hair guideline came, it was interesting. It specifically mentioned that historically, for centuries, Black hair has been policed. And they mentioned specific examples, Afro, Bantu, Locs, and different versions of Black hair, and how for all these years, you are, and we'll see across the line from education, from basically throughout your life, your hair is policed. Even people who were incarcerated basically had to take off their hairstyle, especially if it does not fit the dominant, in other words, the Eurocentric standard of what is called, what is a good hair or what is supposed to be acceptable hair. So that sort of created that interest in me. So these pictures were some of the pictures I took as part of a photography. I did a photo exhibition, part of a student photo exhibition in NYU. And I followed some people, told their story about how their day-to-day struggles in terms of hair. And some of the experiences we'll be hearing, hopefully, as we go along. Part of the project was also to see And it's interesting, like some of these hairstyles, and these were people in the same room or same events, and like this versus this, they sat by each other. It's not like I cropped them. This person was here, this person was here, right next to each other. And it's interesting how, in terms of standard, we may all have our variations in terms of standard, but to me, that curiosity built in terms of the extra effort, the extra attempt Black folks, persons of color have to go through to keep their hair shaped in a way that meets whichever institution, whichever body they find themselves in, that meets the expectation or their standard. I have a quotation here, which from Tanisha quotes, and he mentioned this thing of 250 years, okay, of slavery, and this is where in the United States, 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. And he mentions that until we reckon with our compounding moral debts, America will never be whole. There's still that issue around what is it called? Reparations, which of course is a subject for another one. But my takeaway, especially from this quote, is often when it comes to issue talking about even hair, I see one thing as you live in the US and with time it builds subconsciously is there are certain subjects that when you raise them, people want to say, oh, don't go there. People want to shy away from it. And is it a matter of sweeping it under the carpet? Because it favors, it keeps the norm, and basically it keeps the majority narration going. And I think this is where the more reason why we should still question. And even there are people still today, when you talk about issues of racism, they don't see it as people's daily lived experiences. As we speak today, we'll look at where the Crown Act is. The fact that today, in today's century, there are still majority of states across the US that still have acts that are policing people's hair in schools, in the workplace, and the rest. So this is where I think the nation codes comes in. And especially also to kind of counter that argument that, oh, Blacks have been given slavery, given freedom many years ago, without realizing that the freedom that was given in piecemeal was basically reversed in a lot of ways through Jim Crow, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years. So technically, when we're talking of freedom, I mean, putting all these issues around hair and the rest aside, freedom, we are talking of something that is probably around the time of Ghana's independence till today, when we're talking of the US. And I'm giving context because I know that I've had a lot of this conversation with my fellow Africans and also people from elsewhere who haven't taken time to look at the history. And often they try to dismiss it to say, oh, but freedom has been given long ago. Of course, which follows the majority, the dominant narration again. I've seen people justify on TV about, slavery ended how long ago? Why is people still fuming over slavery? Okay, so slavery may have ended, but the systemic racism hasn't really changed. Now I want us to focus on some sectors, beginning with education. Education has been one crucial area that has observed, that has seen policing, racial hair when it comes to hair policing. From grooming, what they call grooming policy or dress codes, restricting hairstyles. Of course, mostly it targets Black hairstyles, and they are expected to fit the certain criteria from what they will call clean cut to slip ponytails and other descriptions that sort of fits into that standard as more of, again, the Eurocentric standard. I've seen across some of the laws in the states from across the US where they give emphasis. Your hair must not grow beyond your ears, or it must not grow beyond your, what do you call, your collar, your dress collar, it must not go beyond. So anything beyond that. And not even that, we Black folks thankfully, a lot of time we see our hair growing up. Someone said our hair beats even what? Gravity, the law of gravity. And still, if you kept it and it's grown and it's gone up, not even down, they still tell you it's too bushy, it's too big, and it must come down. So it's not just even around your ear or around. So technically, you qualify if it is around your ear or around, but still, they tell you no. So yeah, again, the kind of double standards based on people's expectations. I have this video. I'm hoping it will play. Let's see. I know earlier we struggled with the sound, so I may need help here if anyone will help me.
On the Zoom? Oh.
The pad.
I think that's a link that they're trying to connect it to play the video. I think
Does that maybe try?
I think, yeah, plus I think the link itself is. Try just looking it up on Google.
Yeah.
Is this a YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can probably find it out.
Okay, I will take it up for you too, but yes. Thank you. Actually, I also have some. All right, I think we'll move on. But just, I'm sure this story was in 2018, 2019, I think 2019, where the New Jersey high schooler, his hair, who was a wrestler, sorry, okay, who was a wrestler, and his hair, he was performing live. His again was the one that beats imagination. This guy was this nice guy wrestling with his hair nicely locked at the back, well tied, and somehow still a referee who is whistling in the game decides that this guy's hair did not meet the standard to compete. And so live on TV, he was taken to the sidelines and his hair was cut. So he was given the option whether to continue to play or to wrestle or not. And then based on that, they decided to put scissors into his hair and they cut it. Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
So we're
Let's
showing.
see if the audio will play. Go ahead. Check. So yeah, this was one classic example of education system. There are more across the state. What even led to the first state, California, taking the initiative to introduce a Crown Act was a similar case where a little child, 6-year-old, went to school, my first day in school, and he was sent home. And so because of that, he generated a whole lot of furor. And then that led to basically California gradually introducing. In this presentation also, one of the things I want to emphasize is on the natural hair movements and the role they have come to play in terms of building the consciousness, in terms of building the acceptability with natural hair, which has eventually, of course, led to where we are today. Well, the audio is not playing, but I'm sure those who can, this is the New Jersey one that happened. And so halfway into the game, it was stopped. and he still went ahead and still won the game anyway. I love his determination. But of course, again, it comes down to the issue of whose standard, whose law, and is it a good law? And so, yes. I'll just try to do this one more time. Let's see. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. So this is the earlier sound I tried to play, and hopefully we're looking forward to having interaction with her when we do the group discussion, or we do the panel discussion. So this is State Representative Attica Scott from Kentucky, and she came up with a bill. They call it House Bill 831. And the aim is to end discrimination based on hair. She sent in this morning, and I want to just play briefly.
Greetings, I am State Representative Attica Scott, and I have filed the Crown Act here in Kentucky because we must create a respectful and open world for natural hair. Thank you for engaging in this conversation during Black History Month, where this year's theme is Black health and wellness. We know that respecting our natural hair is about our health, and it is about our emotional and mental health and wellness. Together, we are going to create that world where our hair is respected, where we can show up as our whole authentic selves. I look forward to engaging in continuing conversations about how we pass the Crown Act here in Kentucky and across the country.
Well, thanks. So yes, we will be going to hopefully get to also engage with her soon. So yes, in the education sector, we have seen the example of New Jersey, the Rambo. Now I just want to highlight in the workplace. Here is a TV host from Mississippi, Mobile, Alabama, I should say, not Mississippi. Okay, no, I believe it's Mississippi. So yes, Mobile is in Mississippi.
No.
Oh, it's in Alabama. Okay, so well, thank you. This is this is a reporter who was basically dismissed because with time, what happened basically is she gave birth. She used to keep her head down, basically following the standard that is expected at her workplace, until she went ahead and she changed her hair after she gave birth. And she even spoke to her bosses and she said, hey, I wouldn't have time to be doing the way I had to be doing my hair and the impact and all it was having on me. So she decided to change her hairstyle. Her office said, we'll have none of it. First, she said her bosses said, okay. And then she started. And then soon you'll see that quotation from her. She said the boss told her Mississippi viewers needed to see a beauty queen. And she said, why? The question why my hair doesn't lay flat. So basically, they were basically saying, oh, this is how we used to see you. This is how your hair was. This is how people came to like you. It sounds like your new style, which it wasn't even like a lock. It wasn't even like she left an afro that was that size. It was just changing a bit of the way she used to do her hair. That alone warranted her bosses dismissing her. Again, in the workplace, thank you so much, Shukri. They said two good heads. I always stress on two good heads. Two good heads are better than one. You can have a lot of down heads and they may not be that good. So this is another example of workplace. And funny enough, this was a team pack in Texas. of all places, it's not even like an office. It's not like a work environment where you say, oh, you may talk about standards being high, but this is a theme park. This gentleman, 17-year-old Kerry Washington, he was dismissed when he turned up with his hairstyle. He got a job. It's not like he did it. He got a job, but he turned up and they said, we are sorry. Your hairstyle doesn't meet our grooming policy or standard. And so Kieran was asked to go home. The good thing though is what you see, this picture you see is a picture of him after he lost the job. A fashion company decided, we'll take you on, we'll take you up, and we'll work with you. And so they took him and they put him as one of their models. And thankfully, he may have lost the theme park job, but he got a better one. And then among professional groups and associations, this lady you see on the screen is a staff at the New York Commission on Human Rights. It just stands out. I went there following when they came out with a hair guidance policy. I went there trying to do interview to just know more about the policy. And it turns out the staff also have their own personal stories. And I want to play a couple of minutes of her video where she talks about what led her to move from her workplace. She was in corporate law. She was doing well. She's London School of Economics, LSE trained lawyer. And she came to join the New York Human Rights Commission. And yet, before joining the commission, in her workplace, when she finally decided that I'll come to terms with changing my style and going Locs, she started receiving aggression, microaggression, discrimination in various forms, all because she decided to go natural. So here is Marisa Jackson.
So yeah, I mean, actually, I am both African American and Jamaican American. My father is from Jamaica. And so I have always loved Locs on other people, but it took a very long time for me to become comfortable with the idea that I would be able to wear them myself. Being someone who very ambitious career-wise all throughout my life. And I grew up actually fighting to be able to straighten my hair because my father would not allow me to straighten my hair. He really wanted his daughters to wear natural hair. But ironically, he did not like Locs because he came from a very conservative Jamaican background. And many people do not know that in Jamaica, Rastafarians are also very isolated and marginalized populations. So for him, any association with Rastafarianism for him was unacceptable. So I felt very bound. I could not get Locs, but I also was not being allowed to straighten my hair. So for me, my hair story it's something I'm very passionate about because it's very tied to my personal independence and autonomy. And I think that's just sort of a microcosm for how many Black people, particularly Black women, feel about their hair more generally. The ability to wear our hair the way we want to is very liberating for us when we're constrained on many sides in society.
Outside the family, you mentioned the family situation and your dad. Outside the family, let's go into your professional setting.
Sure.
Or groups or organizations or your workplace, your previous work experience or whatever. Have you had to any occasion where you felt that people had issues with your hair?
Absolutely. So I'm actually an attorney, and so I also practiced law for all of my career until I came here to the commission. And I also practiced at a very large, very, very prestigious, what they call a white shoe law firm. And so the image is very conservative, and everyone is expected to more or less blend into sort of one sort of branded image of what a corporate lawyer on the east side of Midtown Manhattan should look like. And it's not possible when you're wearing Locs. When I interviewed to join law firms, I actually got tons and tons of offers and I was wearing my hair relaxed in a straight, chemically straightened state. But then over the summer, when I was a summer associate, I started the process of like sort of transitioning towards Locs. And so by the time I came back to join full time, I had Locs. And it was a sort of a sense that I had duped the firm. That was not my intention at all. I was very young and I wasn't very good at like paying attention to like what was really expected of me. But once I had the Locs, I did start getting some very open criticism from actually from other Black lawyers at the firm, because I think it was said earlier, we do a lot of self-policing. We police ourselves because we're trying to protect ourselves from negative consequences on the job. However, I also received what I would term microaggressions from other white lawyers. So one white attorney who was supervising me asked me, can you even wash your hair when it's like that? Like, how do you take care of your hair in that state? So that's not the same as saying, don't wear that hair, but it's a way of othering you. And it's a way of letting people know that they are noticing you, and not because of your talents and your, spectacular legal performance, but because of your hair and the crazy way that you're wearing it. Her statement was actually quite hurtful because it also spoke to like stereotypes about Black people's cleanliness, which is another stereotype that is related to dreadlocks and other natural hairstyles. The idea that if it's not straight, then it can't be clean. There's no understanding of how we invest in and maintain our natural hair. So yeah, I've definitely faced discrimination in the work setting.
So that's Marissa Jackson, an attorney, and also a deputy commissioner at the New York Human Rights Commission. And it was interesting how the narration or the interview suddenly switched to her personal story, but also how that has more of maintained or encouraged her to go into what she's doing, and also to move from a more higher position within the law to go to the commission to do more of advocacy. And then to the prisons. The prisons are no exception. The gentleman on the left, this is Virginia. He was isolated. He was confined all by himself for 10 whole years. 10 whole years, all because he refused to scrape his locks. And the prison said, we'll take off your hair before we put you in. He said, no, I'm a Rastafarian. It is my religion. It is my belief. And I do not play with my hair. So you cannot touch it. And the prison service said, well, as long as you keep this, you are not going to join any other person in the prison. You are going to stay in a solitary confinement. And you know how the prison cells are. More of, maybe if you go to one of these bathrooms are bigger, like those single one bathroom sits in your house, something like that. And he was kept in there for 10 whole years. He will only walk out, I think 20 minutes a day to go get food and to be able to take a shower, I think, I don't know, once in the 5 days or something. And so for 10 years, he had to go through this. This gentleman was in Pennsylvania. He too was put in, he said, I am a Rastafarian. I have kept these locks all my life, and I'm not going to come in because I'm going to do. Funny enough, he was not even found guilty. He was just on remand while the case was being looked at. So in other words, by US law, you are innocent until proven guilty. So this guy was supposed to be innocent and should have been treated as such. But here, he was put in solitary confinement 1 whole year until his lawyers picked the case up. So these are examples of, even within the prison system, how persons who come in with hairstyles that do not conform to the dominant white standards are policed. And there are more. I have a slide, I think there was one I was building on the security services here in the US, from the Navy, from the armed forces, across institutions, security services, the police, certain hairstyles you must not wear to the workplace. And often, again, these are hairstyles that often fit the categories of black hair. So when you bring them in, you would be either rejected. First, you will not be recruited. If you will be recruited, you must have to take it down before you join. Thankfully, in the security services, there's a bit of change coming. I think in 2016 and more recently 2018, the Navy and another aspect of the security services began making reforms. It is still not enough to get to where our people can wear our hair. There's no law that says that if your hair even grows to the level of your butt, you cannot hold a gun. There's nothing that should prevent someone's hairstyle from going to, let's say, work in a security service. And yet we have seen it all over within the security services. That takes us to the next part. And then very soon we'll have the panel and we'll have more interactions. And then we can also have your questions coming in. This semester, I am looking again, I decided to revisit this topic of natural hair. As we speak, we'll come to how many states so far have been passing the law. But what I'm trying to do this semester is looking at it more from how to counter the narration. What has led to the movement growing? What has led to the states now coming to this reckoning to say, let's change the laws. Let's remove anything that prevents someone from wearing their hair the way they want to. And theoretically, I came to with these two perspectives that I'm looking at, one being the critical agenda setting. Now, the media often is considered to say they set the agenda for conversations. And whether having worked in the media, I'm not sure every day you go to work and think that today we want to decide what people talk about. But naturally, like you, when you are posting even on social media, your aim is to generate engagement. You want people to like your message. You want people to talk about it. So consciously or subconsciously, the media becomes this dominant force in society. I have seen it so much so that, in fact, today there's a term they call mediatization, where our daily lives are now linked to media. From how you were born, how you even christen your name, fit certain norms as it is published. And so today is dating. The media platforms are becoming platforms for people's dating. Media platforms are becoming platforms of what you decide to even wear. Media platforms are determining how you even keep your body fit in terms of workouts. So gradually the media from the mainstream to today's social media are sort of determining the way we live our lives. So the media has for so long determined the agenda for us. If you see how the natural hair laws or the Crown Act are coming in shape, you will see that there is another component which is called a critical agenda. And one of the key proponents for this, as well as what's related to counter-hegemony, is Stuart Hall. This Jamaican who moved to the UK and has contributed great intellectual materials to counter hegemony. So that hegemony concept that there is a dominant group who wants to always perpetuate, who always want to stay in power. Who doesn't like power? Who doesn't like the same way we see the way our politicians fight over power? Everyone wants that. So from the language we use, English or French, and letting it stay to even the food we use and what is considered acceptable food, to everything we do, there is a force that says, this is how it is done. And any attempt to change that standard or that form is considered is opposed. That is why when someone wants to dress in a way, they tell you, this is not how society expects you to dress. So that hegemony. But thankfully, we are seeing a new norm where people are countering the standards of society to say, we will not allow this to stand because it is contrary to our beliefs, it's contrary to our health, it's contrary to our way of life. And that's hair is part of us. So they are debunking the notion that hair is negative, that hair is kinky, hair is dirty. Your natural hair in this form do not conform. That is the concept of counter-hegemony. A bit more about the natural hair movement. We saw from the civil rights movement. I was reading about Malcolm X, and he described how this concept of what they call a conk, where people had to more of straighten their hairs in a way using really toxic cream. And Malcolm X described that when he got to a certain age, his friend had to use the hair it has to use this cream and they prepare it locally, and they use it on him. And then he said, this is one of the dehumanizing days of my life. What he went through to put his hair in that form. We've seen a lot of others around that period building a sort of consciousness during the civil rights movement to say that Black power entails all the Black body, and to remove all this, remove all the shackles that have been placed on the Black body because of the dominance system. But from the civil rights movement, I think the general understanding and literature so far considers the fact that the best of the movement now is what we are seeing now, which is the natural hair movement. First, in the sense that this professor from Temple University talks about the fact that it built the movement over the last decade with formation of what they call, over here, it talks about almost normalizing, that the movement have basically come to normalize natural hair. And so because of that movement that are growing, people have suddenly realized that after all, that kind of narrations my parents may have trained me, that keep your hair this level, we discount it. We see groups who are now proposing it. We see groups who are now living it. And daily they are narrating how it is done on TV, on social media and elsewhere. And he said, we have a critical mass now, a critical mass who says, we will not tolerate what we were told before. I remember a protest in New York where I went and I'm sorry to use the curse language, basically, but what she said, we will not stand, we say we are not our great grandparents. And he used the F word and he said, we will F you. In other words, and this was a Black lady who was on the street and saying, we will not follow the norm, we will not follow that standard that says we must keep our hair this way. We will resist, we will oppose. And he says, we are not our great grandparents. We are not so and so. Power of social media. Meet Jovi. Jovi lives in Brooklyn. Whilst I was doing the photography, I checked online and I saw her work on YouTube, on Twitter, and basically in her home, she converted her bedroom, part of it that she shares with her partner. She converted this table here into a home studio. And from here, she talks about her personal experience. One day she was kind enough to make me follow her through her day as she went to a hair salon to pick products to keep her style. And she talked about, she too was in corporate New York, working in Times Square somewhere in a corporate body until her hair became a challenge when she decided she was going to grow it natural. And she had to resign, sadly, from her work because of that. And now she's using social media as a force to build a movement around natural hair. This is one of the groups of natural hair who have formed the movement. And it's interesting, this group, because the natural hair movement has various forms. Some folks go out on weekends to have events together in the garden when the weather is good, in a park or in a closed area where they have drinks, where they have conversations, where they advocate, and where they discuss. This particular group I met in New York City, and as you can see, they were in their formal outfits. They went to work. This is lunch break. It was a good weather. There's this park downtown Manhattan, and they go there, grab their lunch, sit there, have conversations around lunchtime. And it's also one of the ways they are proudly showing off their natural hair to say, we are proud, we are keeping it, and they wear it wherever they go. And just briefly about the Crown Act. So a bit of timeline. In 2019, as I mentioned, New York State came up with what they call hair guidance. And it talks a bit about natural hair, whether treated or untreated hairstyles, such as the locks, cornrows, twists, braids, Bantu knots, fades, Afros, or the right to keep hair in an uncut or untrimmed state. And one thing that sort of is beautiful about that was, of course, first it created this consciousness. People were like, what? And this thing generated so much. I think I saw it first on the BBC. And it was all over, even across the UK, major media were covering, like, what? This thing still exists? That people were still being policed by their hair? So it made a whole lot of headline. But then thankfully, it sort of kicked in a political force. And then California became the first in July 2019 to pass what they call the Crown Act. And then New York came back, and from a guidance or more of saying that these things are human rights, they came to now enforce it with the passage of an act. As we speak, as I was counting, I saw about 8 states or so that have passed so far. And there are more, as I now together, about 14 states or so that are in the process. One of them being Kentucky, where the state representative tabled this motion. It is still going through the process, hopefully, to get it legalized. At the federal level, last year, 2021, Representative Cedric Richmond tabled in the House of Representatives what they call, so they kept the name the Crown Act. At the federal level, they said Crown Act, and it was introduced. Thankfully, it passed in Congress, it passed in the House of Representatives. As we speak, Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey and another senator also co-sponsored the Crown Act. And as it is the law in the US, once the lower house passes, it goes to the Senate, and the Senate must have to also pass it for it to become a federal law. It hasn't become yet, because as we speak, it's still at the Senate. You know, the Senate is more of now a split Senate. So when the Democrats want to pass something, they are thinking about how much support are we going to receive from the Republican side before it passes. So there's been a back and forth, and they move it to a committee, the committee that will finally work it out and table it. So as we speak, federally, that law is still not yet recognized. So unless a state passes the law to say it is passed, it is still not yet passed. Before I move to the next slide, I want to play this short.
To do a weave, to do wigs, all of that is there.
This is the lady I showed earlier, Jovi, who is a video, who does a YouTube. And she has some interesting concepts to share before we come to the last part of the conversation.
To do a weave, to do wigs, all of that is damaging to our hair. So could we just, other people don't have to damage their hair to be able to just get up to and go to work and just be okay.
Someone who has straight hair that grows downwards, there is no limit being placed on how long that person's hair can be. But if your hair grows up and out like an afro, you're being told that it has to be only a certain number of inches or it's too extreme for the workplace. That's an example. Another example is folks with braids or locks being told that they need to pull their hair back in order to have a certain look in this workplace, whereas people who have different texture hair can wear their hair down, right? So those are some of the examples of the kind of treatment, disparate treatment that people who have come to the commission have experienced. But these kinds of cases are all over the country.
Okay, since we went through this, I'll just forward it briefly.
So I know that,
And hear all the personal.
so I know that
discrimination based on their hair has always been a hot topic. You know, it's very difficult to land a lot of these positions, especially in corporate America, if I was to walk in like this. You know, I would have to wear a wig that day. I would have to get a weave that day, or else, you know, you're just not gonna get the job. But that's just common knowledge when you are an African American woman, period. A Black woman from anywhere in the world, that's just common, you know, that's just what we know, we already know that. Laws are great, it's nice, okay, but again, it's 2019, and the fact that we even have to have this law is a joke within itself. You know, we need to concentrate, in my opinion, on, you know, education, and I even hate to say that because I feel like, again, in 2019, and I hate to say that, you should not have to educate people on, you know, bias and, you know, quote unquote, just flat out racism. You shouldn't have to train people, but it seems like a lot of people need to just learn these things, and putting a million laws into effect isn't gonna do nothing but like allow people to figure out ways around it. Because that seems to, you know, if you don't change the culture, nothing is gonna change. People are just gonna find ways to be, you know, to be biased, racist, racially charged, whatever you wanna say. And, you know, they're gonna find ways around it, so it is what it is.
And she raises some important topics again, which comes to the law. And I'm saying so because I think in addition to making this presentation is also to build a consciousness that the law itself will not effect change. For a law to work, I think there are a lot of laws in this country that are beautiful laws that other countries are building or learning from. And yet, we still see laws, for example, being flouted by the police, for example. We see laws that are flouted by other institutions, for example. Institutions across education can have non-discrimination, diversity, inclusion, and all initiatives relating to inclusion. And yet, people still go around these laws to break it. So I think she raised some important topics, the fact that the law is here. But what if I go to the interview and this person still looks at me when I walk in, and based on that alone, he has determined in his mind that I do not qualify for the job just because of the style of my hair. And then to conclude, I'm bringing just again, looking outside of Ghana. Recently, this issue came up in just last year. This young boy came to, the dad is a Rastafarian, and both of them went to what you would consider Ghana's Ivy League school, Achimota School, a school that has produced one of the top heads of state and the top officials in the country. So a brilliant student. He went in with his hairstyle, and on that day, he was rejected same day by the school. Even after he got admission, even after he packed his things and went on the first day of arrival, they said, I'm sorry, you can't come in with this hairstyle, go back. And this is last year. Thankfully, he went ahead to challenge the law in our Supreme Court. I wrote this piece on it when it came. And it was interesting how Ghanaians still will think today and say, why are you bringing history of racist and colonial policies and how it has impacted? But again, sometimes we are short-sighted in not looking back to history. History is there to serve us. We didn't just suddenly decide that this is the hairstyle we want. Something created that, and we need to interrogate in it. This is also the same school, Achimota School. These students you see here are in the same school. Look at their Black colleagues. This is how they keep their hair. This is how she keeps her hair. They are allowed to keep their hair this way. And this is the same school. This is in the same Ghana. Okay, they are allowed to keep their hair this way. Their colleague Ghanaians are not allowed. And someone will say, oh, because they are not Ghanaians. In Ghana, the dominant or the great migrant community are Nigerians. Besides Ghana, the biggest population we have, which is outside, are Nigerians. Nigerian will not be, they won't allow a Nigerian in my school to wear his hair like this, or any school across Ghana. So it's not because they are non-Ghanaians, but it's because basically they are white or they are not black, they are non-black. And so again, it comes down to buttress the point that it is more than just simple guidance, but then it looks like there's a kind of category of classification. As I mentioned, thankfully, the good news is this young guy the parents went to the Supreme Court, the guy I showed earlier, and he won. He won the Supreme Court's ruling. So the Supreme Court of Ghana ruled that you cannot discriminate against this guy's head because our laws are clear about non-discrimination and everyone's right to access education. So he won. Unfortunately, at Chimota School, this school is spending money given by the state for them to run the school, contesting this case again in court. They are appealing against it. So again, it buttresses the point that it takes time for the system to put us into a state that if you are not so conscious, you come to accept the dominant narration, and there is a need for a pushback somehow. These are a bit of headlines from elsewhere. Here, a Belize police officer who is facing discrimination or discipline action over her hairstyle for wearing a lock. In the UK, a 12-year-old boy won a discrimination case. And in fact, the UK has also got this week, there was a publication from the BBC. Please look at it. The BBC published, I think yesterday or the day before, a short video you should hopefully find on YouTube that documents sort of, and then finally is this 12-year-old boy, 12-year-old girl in, I believe, Jamaica, whose hair was cut by police. The police got her and took down her locks. So my parting words are from Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was the president of Liberia and also the first head of state on the continent. And she made a statement while she was on our national television. And she says, take responsibility, take charge of your destiny, and let no one do it for you. So it's in our hands. Whatever platforms we have, whatever we can do to create a space that we ourselves will feel comfortable, we have to do it. And I believe her message sums it up. Thank you. Well, so right now, I guess we will invite our panelists who will join me here for the next stage. And we have with us 3 students, 1 undergrad, 2 grad students, and they can introduce themselves briefly. And we'll have open conversation. So please feel free to send in your questions, or those of you here can ask. Those on Zoom, thankfully, Mahi and the team are on Zoom to hopefully bring the questions. So let me first invite Ethan. Please join us. Wade and Chelsea. All right, so we'll do a bit of introductions, probably beginning with Wade. Could you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, I'm Wade. I am a political science major, and I am a sophomore from Illinois, Nigerian. Yeah.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Easton Davis. He, him, his pronouns. I'm a 2nd-year PhD student in the Cultural Foundations of Education program in the School of Ed. Identified Black man. My dad is from Jamaica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Bolden, she, her, hers. I'm also a doctoral student in the Cultural Foundations of Education program. I'm happy to be in conversation.
Thank you. Well, just let me begin with you. What has been your experience when it comes to natural hair and your freedom to wear it, and any experiences in general you'd like to share to begin with?
Sure. So I guess I'll talk a bit about my decision and execution of locking my hair as a pivotal point in what my natural hair journey has been, if you will. So I recently celebrated my 6-month lock versary. So before that, did wear my hair natural. My earlier adolescence, my hair was relaxed, so just thinking about that timeline, but to focus on the decision to lock my hair, it was something I'd wanted to do for over 2 years. And for some of the reasons that Benjamin has explained, and that some of the stories offered in the presentation described, it's not as simple as simply doing it. Thinking about the implications, the expectations of the decision to lock hair, and not being able to accommodate a particular event in a way and completely controlling what my image is. Not that that's possible in totality anyway, but that there are material things at stake for Black women, Black individuals, in the decision to wear your hair natural, again, as has been explained. But as far as the freedom that's been offered to, once I actually did make that decision, it's been immense. I'm sure many of you can attest to this, but
Tell us what's that
having hairstyles planned strategically according to an event you're going to for months at a time, right? Like, I'm going to this, and let me make my hair appointment based on that because I want that to be my look. Versus here, I want to embrace my Blackness in a particular way, so I might wear it out. So just being really strategic in a way, and I think attempting to have some sort of control that is never actually granted to us as Black women. And in a full acceptance of that is what locking my hair for me has done, right? Like accepting that I can't control that image and that ultimately I need to do what works for me.
Thank you. Ethan.
Oh, goodness. It's hard for me to think about where to start for a lot of reasons, but I'll say my decision to lock my hair came primarily from a place of resistance and anger. So and I'm sure like many, felt that it was important for me not only to express myself in a political representation of who I am as a Black person, but what that meant in spaces that are traditionally not considered welcoming for us. So I played college football in undergrad, and I went to a very white conservative liberal arts institution. And in my first year there, the head coach was adamant that his players needed to appear more presentable, more professional. So the idea of us looking and acting and being a certain way was a strong connotation to what our hair looked like. And the majority of the players at that time were Black men. So I was like, no, I don't want to rock this season no more. I don't want to have short hair. I want to grow my hair out. And it has nothing to do with my athletic ability. And in fact, I'm going to prove not only to this person, but to the larger institution that I can still do X, Y, and Z and look a particular way. I didn't have all the language then, but that's kind of how I felt on the inside. So yeah, that was 10 plus years ago. And since then, I've decided to continue to lock my hair. I've trimmed it and dyed it and played with it and jewelry and all that. And it's obviously been a part of my identity since I've been here. But I would say the decision was primarily made out of resistance, and coupled with, I mean, it's not just a Black and white issue. I think it's a beautiful issue in that it can also be a way of being, a style, an aesthetic. Like our culture, it's always moving, it's fluid, it's never static. So that has also been a part of just how I've seen myself in community, particularly within my family dynamics, given that most of the women in my family have natural hair, or they rock the Afros or whatnot. And it looks good to see that, both in pictures and cultural artifacts.
Awesome. And how has, let me follow up. How has it been for you wearing, going natural and keeping your hair locked over this period?
How's it been? I think it's sometimes at this point I don't notice as much, right? I don't pay as much attention until sometimes there's that unwanted attention, that hypervisibility, right? Like, oh, your hair looks so good. Or even like the microaggressions and the validations sometimes can be hard, but it's definitely something that I feel like I draw strength from, that I find source of joy and happiness, and appreciation. So yeah, it's been good.
Thank you.
So for me, I didn't really have like a kind of cultural connotation with Locs when I started doing them. In high school, I went to like this weird elite boarding school for like rich kids. And they already thought that I was gonna be like the poor kid, so I was like, it doesn't matter. And and actually my mom is like white and she doesn't know how to do black hair. And so I actually never learned. And so it kind of was like a way for me to like take control over my hair. I felt like I like had like the ability to kind of like play with it, like you were saying, like just do like fun stuff and like little different hairstyles and like figure it out. And that was like kind of empowering for me because I was like, I didn't feel like my hair was like this trashy, junky thing anymore. I was like really happy with it.
Awesome. I do know that prior to this conversation, we spoke briefly and you mentioned an experience within the security service. I mean, feel free if you don't feel comfortable, do not share, but if you like, please feel free to.
I actually joined the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I was gonna train to be an officer, and they were gonna pay me for my school and everything. But then, I mean, a lot of stuff happened, but one of the things that happened was that during the 2-week boot camp, they pulled me aside like the second or third day when I was already like tired and like confused and stressed out, and they were like, "You can't have that hair." And I was like, okay, well, I actually looked it up before I came here and it says right here, like on the little list, like this is one of the approved hairstyles. And they were like, well, actually it's gotta be like this number of centimeters and like this number, like, and like, does that look like that centimeters to you? And they were like kind of yelling at me and I was like stressed out and I was like, I guess not. So then they just cut it off. They brought me to like a barber shop and they gave me like the same buzz cut that they gave the guys. And then I guess I stayed with them for like another 6 months after that. But then I started growing it back out again because I was like, you guys said that as long as it was within the parameters, I could still do it, right? And they were like, well, why do you even want to be different? Why are you trying to like do this to us? And I was like, all right. So I ended up leaving that and some other reasons like 3 months after that. But I got a semester free school. So.
Nice, thank you. I'm going to go around one more question about the Crown Act, and then we will open the floor for conversations. So please, if you have your personal experiences you'd like to share, if you have questions, feel free to throw it at any of us at all. The YouTuber made some interesting, first of all, welcoming the Crown Act, but then also talks about it's not necessarily being like the what is it called? One solution to erasing centuries of practices that have targeted Black hair. How do you first feel about this movement growing around the formulation of laws banning hair discrimination? And in your view, what do you feel in terms of, are these laws adequate to protect us and give us, hopefully, that equal representation before the law, equal representation in our workplaces, equal representation in our schools? Let me start with you, Easton.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a complicated answer in that, yes, law is important, and I believe that having protection in some ways that helps, I would argue, anti-racist policies are important. However, as shared in the video, No, I don't believe that's the total solution. I think that it cannot be separated from other forms of oppression, right? That racist policies are steeped in a history of othering and marginalizing folks based on difference. And the hair, I think is so subtle sometimes, it's so insidious, and yet visible, that like the idea of like, oh, there needs to be a crown act, like what, why, you know? I think that was my initial reaction. I wrote it down. I was like, I didn't even know about it, but I should know about it because we're policed and surveilled in ways that make sense and given our history, at least in the U.S. So no, I think there's a lot more than just a law or legislation that's needed. And I think as a movement, as you shared in your presentation, an ongoing movement of Black liberation and justice is important to think about in terms of reclaiming our identities and our love. Yeah.
Chelsea?
Sure, to build on what Easton said, right, like history will show us social change does not achieve via one avenue. So when we think about the role that a formal law will or will not play, do I think that's a total answer? No. Do I think it's a step in the right direction? Possibly. Especially considering the way policy informs ideology and ideology informs policy, and just thinking about that process as interrelated and something that's dynamic and ever changing, and something that we're all implicated in a number of systems, those that are explicitly about hair and those that are not. I think it is a very complex question, right? But when I think about the representative significance of it, I think it would be reductive to discount it as any marker of progress.
In other words, the act is a first step, but then there's more to be done.
I don't know if I'd say first.
Okay.
I'd say just
One of
somewhere within this.
Okay.
I think it can be helpful because I know I have a lot of like white friends who didn't know that like hair discrimination was even a thing. And so just the passing of a law kind of brings it more onto like the public stage, like people are talking about it more. I think that can be helpful, like because the conversations people have. But I also think that like it's not really about hair. Like you're gonna be racist, you're gonna find a way to do that, like she was saying in the video. And I also think that like I personally have experienced like less profiling due to my locks because I'm light skinned. And so I think like there's this whole other aspect of like, you're gonna be racist and like, you're gonna say like, this hairstyle is dirty, but like darker skin's dirty. So like in the middle, you're gonna like find a like dirty gradient. Like it just doesn't have to do really with just the hair. It's like racist people are gonna be racist. And yeah.
And you touched on a point that I didn't really consider was until as you engage with, you come to know that it's funny how racism has operated and it beats imaginations. And it's true. As you sometimes you are like, okay, take how definition of or classification of races the races, or when they talk of race, what race do you belong here in the US? It has come to the stage where even people who traditionally by their color will not even pass for white, certainly they come to be accepted white, especially people from, let's say, the Middle East. Take an ordinary Israeli, it's not white, but then US law has come to accept them as white because it fits the US. Of course, religion and Christianity is dominant. People, let's say from places like Turkey, have suddenly become white. So, and now even in Africa, North Africans, some are being considered white. So in effect, the US picks, or not the US, of course, Europe picks who they consider based on this kind of random classification, but more of fits a certain population to boost. Take Black population as in this country. I took part in the census the last time. I was surprised. Like we have people who are, let's say, Afro-Caribbeans. Well, of course, they are still considered Black, but let's say the Latins, anyone who is Latin, who is Black, you are considered separately a Latino. So your color do not come to boost the population of Black populations. You may have come from Asia, India, somewhere where your color is Black, but you are considered Asian. In other words, you are not classified under Black population. So it's like there's a kind of this random policy to boost one group against another. But of course, these are all conversations that hopefully with time, we will all have to be engaging with. But I'm glad that you brought that point up. We're opening the floor. Any first questions, any conversations, any experiences that you would like to share? Yes, hi.
So my question is.
Please introduce yourself briefly and then you ask the question.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Khadija. So my question is, what's your favorite thing about transitioning to Locs, like having Locs?
Interesting. What's your
To
favorite
everyone.
thing about transitioning? Who wants to go? Chelsea?
Just not having to think about my hair again. The amount of time that has, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I feel like I don't need to say it to most of you, but the amount of time that goes into our hair, especially styles that don't accommodate its natural state per se, it's exhausting. It was literally exhausting. That's probably one of the other factors that drove my ultimate decision to lock my hair. This hyper awareness of what my hair looks like and needing to predict that, just and the time it takes to do that, as well as the emotional fatigue. So to have those things alleviated, massive.
I've also noticed that people touch my hair less now. I don't know. I had like an afro, people like to touch it. They're like, oh,
Oh my
gosh. Yeah.
Yes. One more and then we'll come. Yes, Ethan.
I think just self-identification and more so to do with patience. Yeah, I think I'm more patient in some ways. That has a lot to do with just transitioning with the transition.
And by patience, how do you mean?
I think so. The early stages of locking in for many folks, or it can take a lot of time. And at least when I started 3 times with 3 different folks. And there was a lot of issues in just understanding what my routine, what my hair care regimen in my scalp required and needed. So I was impatient and frustrated and embarrassed. And I worked at a college for a long time. And there was a particular perception, especially of Black men, that needed to be upkept. So the idea of going through a year or 2-year process until like my locks matured was definitely an internal struggle. But since then, it's been a learning curve that I try to pick back and draw strength from. So I would say that is how I think through the definition and conceptualizing patience at that particular.
And we can hear you. We're ready when you are.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I was just thinking that in addition to
I think we'll be continuing when she yes, we'll be taking questions as but as I said, Madam, if you can hear us, we'll be happy once you speak. I think as
I'm hearing you. I don't know if you can hear me.
right, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was saying that in addition to, well, in my experience, speaking specifically of my experience here at SU, I have found that in addition to, microaggressions and sometimes open aggression that has been mentioned already, that is often directed to people who have dreadlocks. I have also experienced something that I guess is somewhere in that spectrum as well, which is not necessarily aggression, but perhaps more of a fascination, if I could use that word, almost fetishizing a little bit. I have had some experiences with that. I don't know if that falls on the other end of the spectrum or somewhere in the middle, but I find it just as offensive. And I actually had an experience here at SU where a fellow grad student came up to me once at a gathering at one of our professors' homes and just walked up and was like, I've never been able to touch like a Black woman's hair who has hair like yours or something along those lines. And I was so astounded. I could not summon a response immediately. And before I was able to say something, I guess that would have maybe educated her or enlightened her, she just reached out her hand and grabbed a handful of my hair. Like she literally just put her fingers in my hair. I did not kill her. But she was so completely unaware of how deeply offensive that was. And I know this because she did it in the presence of everyone. Like there was like 5 other students just standing there. Most of them were white and most of them just their mouths just fell open because they knew that what she just did is the kind of thing that you don't do. And and so there's just a complete lack of awareness. That's one. And then because other people were there, the department in which I am a student felt like they needed to address it, do something, like they couldn't just overlook it because I was livid. And so that resulted in there were meetings and they invited me to like 3 different meetings to get my opinion as to how they should handle situations like these. And I'm like, y'all need to figure this out. And you should probably have this figured out before and not after. Like you should be proactive rather than reactive about situations like these. I think they made her go to like some diversity and equity and inclusion. Like that was her punishment, I guess. Like she was made to attend like a series of DEIA workshops and she had to report back about what she learned. I'm like, we are PhD students. That is ridiculous. But the point is the complete lack of awareness and also, more importantly, the lack of preparation to adequately handle situations like those. Literally nobody knew what to do because it wasn't a thing in the department. And so it needs to be a thing. It has got to be a thing. And so conversations like these help to make it a thing, like where people realize that a part of violating me as a Black woman is grabbing a handful of my hair because you've never had an opportunity to touch a Black woman's hair. So I'm super happy that this conversation is happening, but it needs to happen all over SU, and there need to be policies in place, and professors and deans and all the people need to know what to do. If a Black student walks into your office and say, look, this just happened to me. Like there's a student who just grabbed a handful of my hair. so that you do not have to summon me to 3 meetings so that I can help you figure out what to do. Because I'm stressed out already because she touched my hair.
Yes,
You know?
Teres, thank you. You really made some good point. I don't know how, but yes, thank you so much for those strong points. For the sake of time, but yes, again, that kind of responsibility places on you. You who were the victim rather become the one that the responsibility is placed on your shoulders. And it's one of the, if we had time, one of the interviews with the Human Rights Commission in New York is reporting it and what goes on. And often, unfortunately, these are done in negotiations. So like in Madame Teresa's example, the thing went to boardroom, meetings to meetings, and the way it is settled, people do not know. So those who, the perpetrators, whether they are punished or not, it doesn't come to the fore for others to see that this is unacceptable. But related to that, we are very excited to have our State Representative Atika Scott with us. I know while we're chatting, you were in Senate meeting, so, but I'm glad that I can see you are still in a vehicle, but if you can hear us, we want to say we are very happy that you could join us. And earlier we played your audio, you played a short video you sent us. Now we can speak to you personally. Tell us first, what was the motivation? I know you had your own share of discrimination, especially related to your daughter, which motivated you. Please tell us more, and at what stage is the bill?
Yes. Thank you so much, Benjamin, and everyone who's participating. I know we're at the end of your program, so I will just move very quickly. I am State Representative Attica Scott, and I'm back home in Louisville now from our state capital. We did have session today. So yes, my daughter in 2016 was a sophomore in high school. Her high school had a new policy that banned natural hair, afros, locks, braids, twists, puffs, etc. And she was a cheerleader, and she was very upset because she wears her hair naturally. And so she and her classmates, they organized, and within a week, they were able to get the policy overturned. But then they came to me because that same year, I won my seat to serve in our state legislature. And she said, you know, Mom, what can we do about this? Can we have a law? And so we started working on the Crown Act, which this may be the year it finally gets passed at the state level, because we finally have a Republican co-sponsor, and that's what we've been waiting for. So I'm excited about that. I'll also just tell you very quickly, y'all, when I was first elected to the state legislature, I will always remember someone posting on Twitter and saying, she looks like someone threw a bowl of spaghetti on her hair. Because you can't see me right now, but you saw the video, and I have my hair in locks. And so I've experienced my own hatred because of my hair from people, and it never feels good. It's always painful and hurtful, but it also gives me fuel to keep going and trying to do what I can to protect other people from that same kind of hatred.
Thank you very much. Now a follow-up question. So the bill came up. How has it been in terms of support across the aisle, across the various political divides in terms of getting this bill in Kentucky signed?
Yeah, so we've been working on the bill for 3 years, and we've never been able to get any across the aisle support. I'm a Democrat. I've never been able to get a Republican to support the bill. But finally, this year, we have a Republican who is signing on to the bill. So we should be able to get a hearing in committee on the bill this year, and we're confident that the bill will at least pass the committee.
Could you shed a light more on what the bill does in terms of to the ordinary person of color in your state who keeps their hair the way they want to? What does the bill do to them?
Yes, so here in Kentucky, the Crown Act would protect people in education, at work, in public accommodations, at financial institutions like banks. It will protect you from discrimination based on your natural hair. That's what the bill does.
Thank you. Earlier, we played one video of a New Yorker who said, well, the law is good and it's the first place, but it took years to get to where we are, and people will still not change. To those people who still have those reservations that, well, the law may be good, but people are people. In your view, what do we do more in terms of beyond the law to give everyone, despite of your color, that that position and that equality that we seek for our global world?
Yes. So, we're talking about equality, equity, fairness, justice, all of that. And for me, policy, legislation, bills, laws, they are part of that justice. So that's one step. But I also, I don't feel like that we as people of color should carry the burden of what white people think about us and our hair. That has to be work that white people are going to have to do amongst themselves as well to address their internalized racism against us because of how we show up in the world. We have to keep showing up and as our whole authentic selves. And that's a form of resistance, that's a form of justice, and that's a form of making it clear we are going to continue to wear our hair any way that we want to. And you can accept us or not, but we're not going anywhere. So I don't want anyone listening to feel like you have to carry the burden of trying to change people's hearts and minds, because that's almost an impossibility. What I will say is that people like me are doing our work to change laws and also pushing white people to hold each other accountable.
And we have about 14 minutes. I'm going to turn to them, to the audience again, if they have questions, of course, including the panel. Anyone could still ask questions. But you are also running for Congress. I know campaigning is going on. So I want to, and before today, I was looking at some of the bills you've tabled in Kentucky. How many are they again? And what's motivating you to run for Congress?
Yeah, so I have filed almost 100 bills in the 6 years that I've been in the state legislature here in Kentucky. And this year alone, I filed almost 20 bills, and they focus on a lot of different issues, whether it's maternal health or addressing racism in our schools. Let me turn back on my light. I have filed those bills. And so, yes, now I'm running for Congress because what I know is that the work has to happen at a larger level. We have to have the Crown Act at the national level. We have to have people serving in Washington, D.C. Who are committed to dismantling racism and who are committed to addressing the issues that for far too long have been ignored as it relates to people of color. We currently have 26 Black women serving in Congress. That's less than 10% of the 435 members of Congress. That is not a representative democracy. If we want a representative democracy, we have to get more Black women elected to office, more Black men, and more people of color. And that's how we get to justice. That's how we get to equity.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Questions? Yes.
So, first, thank you, State Representative Scott, for your activism, for all your work. We're really proud of you, and we hope to learn more of your work. And to the panelists, thank you, all of you. I would like to suggest that we take a break, get some food, and then come back and continue the conversation, because the audience has been here for some time, and I appreciate your listening and taking everything in and thinking. So let's take a break, get some food, and continue the conversation.
I know that others, how does that work? I know others are also having to be leaving soon. So probably we could still continue, but you could step out, grab food, come sit in the conversation. How about that? Okay, so that we are also wrapping up those who have to leave at 7. So we respect their time too. So the conversation will continue, but please feel free to step out, grab food, and let's use the remaining time to wind up basically. Are there any questions for Representative Scott or any panel member here? Sorry, Nadia, earlier, did I see your hand? Oh, okay. Any questions? All right. We will conclude.
Oh, there's a question online.
Oh, there's a question online. Please.
You can unmute yourself.
Okay. Yes, if you, I see you have, I don't know, your device is K09. Could you
Yes.
introduce yourself?
Yeah. This is Kola Oluwabemi. I am a graduate student at Whitman. thanks for putting this together. And just like all the previous speakers have mentioned, I too appreciate that conversations like this is what will keep moving the needle and getting things in the right direction. So my question here is geared to either the panel or Representative Scott. So there's we mentioned earlier that we shouldn't put this on our shoulders. We shouldn't feel like we should bear the burden and responsibility of educating people. But how do we approach these conversations so that we ourselves don't miss out on teachable moments? So because we should be able to inform people, and it's not just white people. There are some of ourselves, through socializations, as you mentioned in your brief, that we feel like certain appearances is what's beautiful, and certain appearances are not beautiful. As you were talking, I look into the hair market industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industries, right? So the question again is, how do we educate people and carry on this conversation at an individual level?
Thank you very much. And yes, I agree that it's not just, it's an education for us all. Like I said, I was joking with a friend. I said, if I were to go back home this year and my mommy will see me in Locs, she'll go like, what has America done to you? That is what she will say. I'm still looking forward to the day when I can freely wear it and my family will still accept me as I am. So there's still a lot more we will have to do. And I think it's a question to ask, what do we do in terms of, it says education movements, to take this pride and to take the advantage to educate ourselves, to educate the people around us. Anyone wants to go, it's open. Okay, well, you guys, so yes, that's listen, can you respond briefly before we take the next?
Sure. I was going to say that I think it depends on the person and obviously the extent that they feel comfortable. I mean, I think it's important to just recognize labor, and even in these teachable moments, it's a choice for some preservation. It could be a choice, can be a choice of love. And I think it's important to acknowledge that even in these moments, whether it's someone who intentionally is saying this or that, and they may not understand the impact, that the transformation has to start within. And I acknowledge that process for me is still ongoing. So I think it starts a lot with the individual, and it has to be in a place where we understand the context.
Yes.
I also just think it's important just to keep like wearing your natural hair, because like I went to Nigeria and my dad, the first thing he said was like, oh, like what are you, Bob Marley or something? And it was kind of like, no. But like after seeing me wear that hairstyle like for a longer time, he kind of got more used to it. And I really think that like the more people kind of like just like do what they want to do, like the more people are going to be okay with it, because it's like you're just kind of desensitized to it, you're normalized with it. So.
And it addresses the point by the representative that we need to represent. Let's keep on representing. Show up in your natural form as you want to. Did I see two hands earlier?
Nadia.
Yes, Nadia.
So I like the question about educating people on an interpersonal level. Because one of the things that we really talk about today is within the Black community, how hair is also a problem. So it's not just, Black versus white, but we have the issues of like texturism, which is a big thing. So in terms of education and having these one-on-one conversations, it starts from, people in our immediate lives, like our friends or family, and then it goes outward. So as an example, I think 2 points were mentioned, and one was, for example, the time it takes to do natural hair, which is something I want to comment on, but also the color aspect of having natural hair and the range of, colors that Black people come in, that we represent, and how that affects hair. So in terms of using a personal example, just to give context, so I'm from Jamaica and I went to an all-girls school and I had in high school, you have your group of friends. So I have my group of friends and I was the least mixed looking person in that group. And so there were a lot of conversations growing up about texturism because I have the most Afrocentric type of hair. And many of my friends were mixed with like Chinese or Indian. So they have like longer, curlier, fuller hair. And I experienced a lot of discrimination even being in that group of friends. So for example, simple things such as the politics of time. As groups, we wanted to go out and they would create like last minute activities as a group and I would have to decline or reject because my hair wasn't groomed to go out. And so even in that was like an example of exclusion. I could not participate and we're all Black people, but there's the different levels of mixing and mixture and who is, in terms of beauty standards, who's more accepted because, they have longer fuller hair and they can rub condition and it will curl and pop, whereas I need to sit and take the time to cornrow or do a twister, which takes hours to do. So there's that. I also have like examples where in terms of dating, that's another big issue. I remember I was 14 and I had a crush and a boy told me he wants a girl with long hair. And I found out that was code for saying he wanted my best friend at the time. So that's another issue. But I think what I'm getting at is I like the diasporic element of the presentation, which we're not talking that much about. We're really talking about the United States, but that's also important because anti-Blackness shows up in various spaces across the world. And my example is just one of many. And I mean, there's so much more I could say, but the conversation I'm saying starts with even within the Black community because we do have that issue within ourselves. And if you have persons who are Black who are holding the mindset of whiteness, then how can we challenge that, that standard and that barrier? So we have to participate in the education. We can't leave it to the white people because we have Black persons who also need to be educated because they're performing the role of whiteness. Does that make sense?
Thank you. You hit a nail on the head on that. And I saw one of the things apparently that of course, in addition to, for instance, during slavery, in addition to scraping the Black hair, and then later trying to change the identity, was later along the line, people were not educated even about doing the hair. And I'm glad about something that is happening now in Louisiana, where they are now making it a policy for a hair salon to go for mandatory training. So in Louisiana now, a state that used to have a law where women couldn't freely, especially Black women couldn't freely wear their hair and they had to cover it. Today, hair salons are mandating even the white salon owners to go for training to learn how to do Black hair. I think it's one of them. So first, yes, educating ourselves first, but also institutions that do these things, because it's not acceptable for you to walk into a salon and the person there tells you, oh, I don't do Black hair. What is Black hair? What is white hair? Hair is hair. And if you specialize in doing hair, you must be able to do any hair that comes to you. So thanks again for Mahi.
Oh, no, because you just I think your whole presentation and what Nadia's comment and Chelsea's comment earlier all kind of made me think of one thing, and also kind of a theme within the presentations in AI. I think when Dr. Campbell presented about police brutality, we kind of understood the inherent anti-Blackness within institutions in the US. So I was thinking whether it's in Africa, you mentioned Achimota, which historically comes from colonial missionary schools. So I think kind of imagining how institutions kind of maintain white standard, white supremacy. So I'm thinking when we're thinking about change, how do we change these things? I don't want to teach white people, but we should be conscious about transforming institutions or building our own institutions, because this kind of enforcement at the cultural level is attached to the institutional. All the videos we saw, schools, prisons, education system, so all of them are institutions, corporate. So it just got me thinking about that's a central theme.
Thank you.
Yes, well, before I go, are there other questions or comments? Because we're just about.
Yes, about wrapping up.
But I do have a comment, or,
No,
yeah,
please.
so, just to follow up on what Mahi and others have said, I think, we now live in a moment of, we've seen social movements, we've lived through the pandemic. We see rising discontent among people with increasing wage inequities, social and economic inequities. And I think people are really questioning like the utility value of a lot of things, like what is important to me? Is this job so important to me that I'm willing to give up my health, expose myself to toxins to be able to maintain this job? Or has my values changed, like what I pay attention to? Is it changing as we reflect on all of these changes that we're going through, so that people are making different sort of risk calculations and saying, I'm no longer willing to accept certain things? And really it is a moral, like a philosophical question, because it's what do we value? And I think this conversation is important because the hair movement is part of these larger challenges to the economy, the capitalist structure that we have, which is reflected in the racism and the anti-Blackness and all of the issues that we face. So yeah, I think it's a very important conversation, and I know we'll continue as we have dinner and as we go to our classrooms. And
Yes, indeed. The conversation should go beyond now. We are going to be wrapping up. I'm going to take a comment from, of course, if the question is comment, please feel free to.
It is, I don't know if it's the,
And then we will wrap up. Yes.
I'm not sure if it's the appropriate time, but again, I'm a Professor Jackson here in the Department of African American Studies, and as well as the Executive Director of the Community Folk Arts Center. And we are the Community Folk Arts Center, that is, we're very proud to be in collaboration with African Initiative and to help facilitate this conversation with the art that you're surrounded by. And I just wanted to comment on that. I think it speaks to what you initially started. I'm sorry, what's your name? Chelsea. Chelsea, when you said that policy informs ideology and ideology informs policy. And it is the ideology that is also crafted by cultural and visual representation. And the more that we see ourselves both not only on Black bodies, but as is also represented visually, then we insert ourselves more into conversations. That is what the Community Folk Arts Center is about. It's about having visual representation of the African diaspora and sometimes other underrepresented groups, so that you can see yourself on this campus. You can see yourself in affirming images like the ones behind you. And so we are proud to present this pop-up exhibition, artwork by Michael K. Wilson, who is also a doctoral student at Temple University in the Department of Africology. And so he does work that talks about this, like these images, and there's a quote, you have a flyer here, where you can see this on his Instagram. He says, telling the world you exist and showing the world your existence is beautiful can be an act of defiance. And I think that's really what we're talking about.
We have more of the flyers here, by the way. Please feel free to.
Right, how we express ourselves through our hair in ways that are affirming, in ways that are authentic, in how we see ourselves is both beautiful, but also an act of defiance. And when I think about the image that you shared of the wrestler, when I first saw that, I was angry, because I felt like he was assaulted. I was furious, and other people were like, I mean, it's like, what do you do? And a lot of people applauded him for still pushing through, but I wish he would have just said, not today, right? That you have a boundary and a line where it can't be crossed, because I think that would have been much more of a powerful message than the fact that he persevered after being assaulted. I think we do too much of that as Black people. And so I'm going to stop there. Enjoy the art. Please visit this artist, because these are actually prints that are for sale, and they're affordable because it's like 80% off because of Black History Month. There's different images, different sizes, and you can contact him on Instagram if you have any questions. And my last shameless plug is to please visit the Community Folk Arts Center at 805 East Genesee Street. We're down
at the bottom of the hill, it's not that far. Uber to us if you have to.
Less than
The
10
bus,
minutes walk.
the bus will take you there. We have an excellent exhibit called Carry the Weight. It is a artist, Shaniqua Gay from Atlanta. And so you get some Dirty South art happening too, where she's talking about Black people, Black women and representation in a very beautiful way. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to conclude, but I'm just going to go around, take final words, and we're done. So Rep Scott is just still with us. We will have your final words as we conclude.